A quorum being present, this town meeting is called to order. Please rise for the reflection and an invocation to be given by Ms. Linda Snow Doxer, and we'll immediately follow that with the Pledge of Allegiance. Ms. Doxer, Ms. Snow Doxer.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Thank you to all of the town meeting members, town staff, select board members, police details, and residents who are joining us here and virtually. And thank you to RCTV for making this meeting and so many others accessible to everyone. I looked up the word invocation in the dictionary to ensure that I understood my job correctly. An invocation is the action of appealing to someone as an authority for an action, and that is exactly what we're here for, to take action on important town business. Without us, this town could not move forward. I look out at all of you with gratitude. We offered and were elected to perform an important service to our community. Let it be our duty to weigh the decisions outlined in the warrant with care, thinking not only of our own needs and differing opinions, but also of those of our town's diverse neighbors, businesses, faiths, and visitors. Let it be our duty to not only think of our present, but also to consider our history and plan our future. Let it be our duty to not only consider all generations of people currently living in our community, but also to consider future generations and the earth that we are passing on to them. We have a large responsibility, but rather than a burden, this is an opportunity to do good. We are all in this together. When we think of our responsibility to our future generations and our earth, it is important to recognize that our land has a history. Our library has researched and summarized an important part of this history in its land acknowledgement. You can check it out on the library website. It recognizes that Reading, and I quote, is located on the seized ancestral lands of the Pawtucket Band of the Massachusetts tribe. Pawtucket, now called Lynn, is a vast territory that extends from the Piscataqua River in New Hampshire down to the Charles River. The Massachusetts tribe are the descendants of the original people that the English first encountered in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. We encourage everyone to learn more about the indigenous people that originated on this land, and there's a link there on the website. And as we learn more about the history of our town, there are also other marginalized peoples whose contributions need to be researched and acknowledged, including the enslaved people who worked tirelessly to establish our town and fight for our country. As beneficiaries of the sacrifices of the indigenous and black and brown people who lived here before us, may we recognize our ancestors' responsibility, apologize, and begin reconciliation with the descendants of those who played such an important role in our heritage. As we, elected town meeting members, make decisions about the future of Reading, may we appreciate their roots and investment in this land while making our commitment to actively care for all of the people who live here and the land we cherish. Town meeting is about all of us making decisions to enable our town, our community, to be the best that it can be. It is our responsibility, with the help of each other, to choose our words wisely, taking responsibility for their impact and their direction. We and our families, in our communities, and in our global village have gone through a lot in the last 3+ years. I'm hopeful that our demeanor and our voices can role model what it will require for our world to start the healing process. Deep listening, truth, respect, a trust of positive intent and love. We are all in this together, and together we can make a difference. I'd like to end with a poem, and I'd like to thank Cheryl Lestrade for inspiring me with this poem by Laura Grace Weldon. The message is that we should be like the giant redwood trees, strong and beautiful, with longevity because our roots ground us together. It's called Redwood Dharma by Laura Grace Weldon. Redwood trees have lived on Earth for over 240 million years. Homo sapiens, about 200,000. Despite massive size, old-growth redwood root systems are shallow. Trees reach 350 feet tall, yet don't topple in the strongest winds. Each one's roots interlace with its neighbor's roots, creating a vast network of support, unseen on the surface. They hold on for 1,000, 2,000 years, maybe more, all the while showing us how to grow up. We have important work to do. Let us intertwine our roots and establish the foundation for our town to flourish for the long term. We can do this, and I look forward to doing it with each of you. Thank you.
Thank you. Now the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The clerk will now read the warrant.
To any of the constables of the town of Reading, greetings. In the name of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, you are hereby required to notify and warn the inhabitants of the town of Reading qualified to vote in the local elections and town affairs to meet at Reading Memorial High School Performing Arts Center, 62 Oakland Road, in said Reading on Monday, November 14th, 2022 at 7:30 o'clock in the evening, at which time and place the following articles are to be acted upon and determined exclusively by town meeting members in accordance with the provisions of the Reading Home Rule Charter.
Mr. Doxer moves that we dispense with the further reading of the warrant except for the return. Is there a second? Second. All those in favor, please raise your hand. Those opposed, motion carries.
By the virtue of this warrant, I, Laura Gem, on I don't remember the date, 2022, notified and warned the inhabitants of the town of Reading qualified to vote on town affairs to meet at the place and the time specified by posting attested copies of the subsequent town meeting warrant in the following public places within the town of Reading. Precinct 1, Warren Killam School. Precinct 2, Reading Police Station. Precinct 3, Reading Municipal Light Department. Precinct 4, Joshua Eaton School. Precinct 5, Reading Public Library. Precinct 6, Barrows School. Precinct 7, Birch Meadow School. Precinct 8, Wood End School, and Town Hall. The date of the posting being not less than 14 days prior to the Monday, November 14th, 2022, the date set for town meeting in this warrant.
Before we begin, the chair would like to explain what the probable order of business will be tonight, subject to town meeting approval. We will begin by laying the substance of both Articles 1 and 2 on the table. Article 1 will be taken at the beginning of Thursday night with a report from the school superintendent. 2, instructional motions is traditionally brought up just before we complete town meeting on the last night. Next, I expect a motion to take Article 19 out of order. That is the purchase of property, and it is expected that there will be a motion to indefinitely postpone it. Then we will return to the order presented in the warrant, next taking up the substance of Article 3, amending the capital improvement program. And then I do believe there's a couple a little later on that people have asked to postpone until Thursday night. As a reminder to town meeting members, as previously agreed, all main motions are presented to you in printed form or electronically, and we dispense with the reading of them. All proposed amendments, however, are still read to the body, and those making them need to give them to the town clerk in writing or have them presented on the screen. And one final comment, if you want your vote counted, you need to be in front of the aisle in the middle up there. I believe we are now ready to begin. Mr. Doxer moves that we lay the substance of Article 1 on the table. Is there a second? Second. All those in favor of laying it on the table, please raise your hand. Those opposed? The motion carries. Article 1 is laid on the table. Mr. Doxer moves that we lay the substance of Article 2 on the table. Is there a second? Second. All those in favor, please raise your hand. Those opposed? Motion carries. Article 2 is laid on the table. Mr. Doxer moves that we take Article 19 out of order. Is there a second? Second. All those in favor, please raise your hand. Those opposed? Motion carries. We are now on to Article 19. Mr. Doxer.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Mark Doxer, Precinct 1. Move to indefinitely postpone the subject matter of Article 19.
Is there a second? Second. Mr. Doxer.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. So town meeting members, first of all, good evening. Welcome back. Nice to see everybody. What I wanted to do is lay out a little bit of the background on Article 19 in terms of what's going on, and then the reason why it's being, we're proposing that it be indefinitely postponed this evening. So just so everyone has kind of the same vocabulary here, 17 Harnden Street is the former Walgreens site, and that's what we're talking about in that article, and that's what we'll be talking about this evening. Jackie and I are working out our signals to change the slides here. Thank you. So a little bit of background. How did we get here? So the Pleasant Street Center, the current senior center, has not been able to meet the needs of the senior community for many years. In 2017, we hired UMass. They performed a study that outlined many of the deficiencies. We have users and citizens have raised concerns about its ability to meet our needs on a very regular basis. And the pandemic made the gaps even clearer. Really, there's only one area in the building available for programming, and it's often too small to meet the needs that we have. There are restrooms only on the second floor. The kitchen is not appropriate to the needs, and it's only capable really of reheating as opposed to cooking. And very importantly, there's insufficient programming going on to meet the needs of the community. So the actions leading up to Article 19 have been that the demographics of our community have shifted pretty dramatically. The last census showed about 27% of the community is age 60 plus, with estimates that it'll be more like 30% of the community by 2030. In 2021, town meeting, this body, had an instructional motion, and that motion said we want more space for the senior community and added dollars for programming. The select board formed a group called RECALC, the Reading Center for Active Learning Committee, thank you, in November of 21, and here's its mission: explore the current and future needs of the community and initiate planning for a potential new senior/community center in town that will focus on residents age 60 plus and possibly other members of the community. So here's kind of what's happened so far. RECALC has come together and done benchmarking of senior and multi-generational centers in 15 different communities around us. You hopefully all filled out a survey, a community-wide survey, where we had 1,470 responses. A couple of things that we've learned so far in preliminary results from that survey, and then much more is to come on December 6th when we get the final results. But a few things that came forward. Number one, 46% of the people responding to the survey said they'd be willing to pay $100 to $200 or more for a new senior center. A multi-generational approach would be preferred. And again, we'll have those full results on December 6th. From the town side, some specific actions were also taken. The select board approved $900,000 in ARPA funds to support seniors, $300,000 for a feasibility study, $600,000 for programming and activities. The town also issued a request for quotations to downtown property owners for senior center, for a new senior center. We were addressing short-term needs ideally, but also exploring long-term with it as well. Go back just one for a sec. Okay, sorry, keep going. The hue and cry that we've all heard and we've all talked about has been, hey, there's that Walgreens building, and it's been there for 7+ years, 8+ years, actually even longer than that, empty. Why? And why can't we kind of use that and take it over? Why can't we turn that into our senior center? We issued the RFQ. We got one response, 17 Harnden Street, the former Walgreens site. We ended up with two options that were presented to us. The initial RFQ was for leasing space, so we got back from them an option to lease it for 10 years with an option to lease for 10 more years after that. Then the select board voted to issue a second request for quotation. This would relate to purchase. And given the prices that we saw for the lease, we thought it might be interesting to see what a purchase would look like. So that's the second RFQ that was issued. The questions that we now need to address and kind of where we are here is, one, what are the needs that we'd like to address with a new senior multi-generational center? Two, can this site at 17 Harnden accommodate those needs? And three, negotiate the best pricing and terms possible. The opportunity for this space accelerated the exploration. RECALC was planning to move ahead and do this feasibility study through early 2023. And we didn't know that the Walgreens site might even be a possibility, although we were constantly wondering and looking. Our town manager went out and poked again and suddenly we found out that there might be some interest, and we got responses to the RFQ. So this has kind of accelerated our thinking because we want to see if this is a site that might be interesting for us. We're trying to do quite a bit of community outreach to make sure we understand the needs, to make sure we understand how to work with the community, and to see if this site is going to be viable. The recalc survey that I mentioned, again, we'll see results on December the 6th. The Council on Aging, the recalc committee, working closely together to kind of pull together more on the needs and also what it should look like in terms of how to meet those needs for the community. We have sponsored one public session so far to explore the idea and needs. We are planning to do additional sessions. A few of the things that have come up relate to the size of the site in the future, can it accommodate those needs longer term, transportation, and parking. And parking specifically in terms of are there enough spaces, excuse me, and transportation kind of as a broader issue. Not everyone's going to be driving there. How do we work on a transportation network that'll help people to get to the center? We also are looking at alternative sites and options, trying to meet the community's needs, understanding the importance of getting value. Whatever we do has to be worthwhile and purchased at an appropriate price and developed at an appropriate price. And lastly, timing. So one of the issues that has become very clear to us as we're talking to various members of the community is that the idea of a center sooner than later could make a lot of sense, again, if it meets our needs. And something that's way out in the future doesn't have as much appeal, especially to folks who might be using it now. So we've been looking at some different options in terms of locations. If we were to purchase an existing building and renovate it, 17 Harnden is kind of at the top of the list. We have looked at some plans to expand the current Pleasant Street Center. We've looked at building new facilities on town-owned land, whether it's Simon's Way or Oakland Road or other locations, although as we all know, there aren't many other locations in town. We've also looked at some other opportunities, potentially something at the Market Basket Mall, that site, even the RMLD at 230 Ash Street to see if that might be a possibility, and more recently, the Rite Aid on Haven Street, which is now up for sale as a lot. Each of these has different timelines and costs that are all being explored as well. So Article 19, here are kind of the next steps. We had hoped tonight to be able to provide town meeting with a plan for that site as a senior center, potentially having negotiated a cost for purchase and gotten a construction estimate for the renovation. We have not progressed far enough to provide a clear plan or answers. Therefore, would like to indefinitely postpone this. There are a lot of activities that are going on, in addition to the meetings that I mentioned. Inspections are taking place of all of the systems in the building, including safety, sewer, roof, elevator. An appraisal and market value analysis is underway, looking at the state of the commercial market and understanding what that means for this site. We have issued an RFP or RFQ? RFQ for an owner's project manager, which would be required if we were to move forward on this project. And by the way, the Permanent Building Committee is aware of the project and most certainly would be involved in anything that we would be doing. An architect to look at a plan and estimated costs, and then further review and discussion of other potential sites. So here's the approach. Bring in some expert resources to help in the evaluation, planning, and costs. And I think we'd like to complete as much as possible for sometime in January or late January of 2023, working closely with Recalc, working with the Council on Aging to support these as well. Let me give you a potential timeline if things looked good and move forward at that point. The next step in late January, early February would be for the Select Board to vote. And if the Select Board then approved the proposal and feels the town should move ahead, we could schedule a special town meeting in February of 2023. With that timing, if town meeting approved the plan, a debt exclusion could go to the voters as part of our April 2023 scheduled election. And to give you kind of a flavor for what this is, if we were to borrow somewhere between $10 and $12 million, depending on interest rates and depending on other things, that would look like probably $100 to $120 per average household in terms of taxes. Another question that's come up is, okay, what would happen to the Pleasant Street Center? A lot of ideas at this point, nothing definitive, but here are a few of them, and we would most certainly encourage more input. This could be an interesting town resource to hold on to the ownership of it. RCTV conceivably could move to this location. In fact, this is exactly what's happened in Somerville. They took a small, older fire station and turned it into the community access headquarters. It could be used for offices and meeting space. It could be additional community space for programming. We could consider private development on the site. We have already received an unsolicited proposal that would keep the municipal parking and then do building in addition to that. This would require an RFP process if we were going to go in this direction. And again, I repeat, that was an unsolicited offer that came in. Could it be a restaurant? Other options, all open at this point, all interesting ideas. But we're thinking about that in terms of what would we do also. That's all kind of I have. Mr. Moderator, I don't know if there is discussion that's possible on this or how that works.
Yes, there is possible discussion, but keep in mind where the motion is to indefinitely postpone. So is there further discussion on this? None appearing? Are we ready for the vote? All those in favor? Did you have a question? I'm sorry, I didn't see you. Yes, go ahead.
Stephen Cool, Precinct 6. When you say multi-generational, could you just very briefly say what that would comprise?
Sure, thank you. So the question was, what would multi-generational comprise? The idea would be that it serves the needs of the senior community, focused on the senior community, but also works with other parts of the community, whether they're young people, folks who don't have kids in schools anymore. And the opportunity could be, this is a bit of an exaggeration, but almost a 24/7 kind of operation, where activities could be taking place on a very regular basis, days, nights, weekends. And the ability to work with different parts of the community, not just the senior community. One of the things that has come up, however, is we've learned that kind of moving things around and having to take things out to sponsor every single activity is difficult, it's time consuming, and takes a lot of resources. So some things would be set in place. Certain rooms would have a defined function. But the layouts that we've seen so far include a lot of multifunctional space that could be configured. So if you have large meals, large activities, the space could be configured to accommodate that. And that should be able to work as a senior center and also accommodate other generations. Did I answer your question?
Mr. Cole?
So really what you're proposing is a community center, not so much just a senior center.
So the feedback from the survey, we're very anxious to look at in more depth. There was a question specifically that asked, would you like it just senior, multi-generational, senior community center? From the preliminary results, a lot of folks talked more about community orientation. We'd like to see what they meant. We have some open-ended questions where there were hundreds of answers. That's what's being analyzed now. We'd like to see what people had in mind.
Further discussion on indefinite postponement? Not appearing? Are we ready for the vote? All those in favor of indefinite postponement of the substance of Article 19, please raise your hand. Those opposed? And the motion carries. The motion is indefinitely postponed, excuse me. We will now move to Article 3. Ms. Engstrom.
So before I get into Article 3, I'm going to quickly review the reserve position for the town. So we have certified cash at just over $19.9 million. And we have some proposed uses during November town meeting of just over 2.9, leaving us with about 17 million remaining in free cash. We also have stabilization funds of 1.7 and FinCom reserves of 200,000 for just under $19 million remaining after all is said and done. This represents 16.4% of our estimated projected revenues for fiscal '24, which far exceeds the 7% minimum reserve policy set by FinCom. This next slide just shows you free cash and stabilization in a graphical form. So it's showing us in green the free cash and the stabilization, and in blue, that's our 7% minimum set by FinCom. So you can see over the last 10 years, we've never really approached being in danger of going under. And actually, in recent years, our reserve position has far exceeded the 7%. This slide shows free cash used as compared to regeneration. So regeneration is, in municipalities, we adopt a balanced budget. So we project our revenues and expenses to be equal. So if you collect more revenues than you projected, that feeds into regeneration. And if we spend less on expenses than we projected, then that feeds into regeneration. So the combination is your overall regeneration. What you'll see over the last 10 years is there's only been 2 years where we actually used more free cash than we have for regeneration. So the regeneration is in the blue and the free cash used is green. So in most years, we regenerate more than what we use. So it almost appears that we don't use it at all to fund the operating budget, even though we use it every year. Article 3 is to amend the capital plan. So approval of this article would not fund any of these capital items. It would just amend the capital plan itself. In fiscal 23, we're proposing $405,000 in changes. They're listed there. $80,000 for firearms replacement that was added at the last meeting that we had for capital planning. I guess the firearms that we have, they no longer make parts, so that kind of made it crucial for us to replace them sooner rather than later. $60,000 for Sturgis Park for the tennis and basketball courts, some work that needs to be done there. $65,000 for the fire passenger car for car 1 replacement, and then $200,000 for glycolic reclamation and installation. That $200,000 is a very volatile number, and we're not planning on doing that work until later in the fiscal year, so I won't be looking to fund that in the next article until April. So you'll notice there'll be a difference when we get to Article 4. Fiscal 23 for the enterprise funds, no changes are proposed. So the challenge we saw when we did our collaboration with department heads this fiscal year was that inflation had dramatically increased the cost of our capital projects. And during the pandemic, we had planned to use 5.5% of our budget on capital and debt. And that was supposed to end in fiscal 24. When we had to add all the additional costs to our capital projects from inflation, we had to do a lot of shifting to make things work. So in talking to FinCom, they said it would be okay to stay at 5.5 for another year through fiscal 25 so that we didn't have to push too many things out. So what you're seeing here is a lot of things that are increasing in cost and things that were less crucial or less time sensitive being moved out so that we can continue to do the things that are very crucial. The enterprise fund for fiscal 24 just had one adjustment of $5,000 to an engineer vehicle from $30,000 to $35,000.
All set. Further discussion? We do. Was her hand? Ms. Snow-Doxer, did you have a? Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Yes, I had a motion to move to include pickleball courts in the $60,000 for the FY23 general fund. It mentions tennis courts and basketball courts, and I've heard from many people in town across generations that they're interested in more opportunity and more spaces in which to play pickleball. And so I am moving that we add, we change the line that says increasing $60,000 for Sturgis Park tennis and basketball courts to include tennis, pickleball, and basketball courts, and wondering if that's possible. And then the second part is in FY24, the $175,000 that talks about field, playground, court improvements, including basketball, tennis, and I also, if it's not implied that pickleball would be included in that work, then I'd like pickleball courts to be also on that agenda.
Okay, does that cover your proposed amendment?
Court improvements. Including, okay.
Is that where you want it?
I would say including pickleball. Yeah, that was, I had tried to write it out.
Is that now correct?
Yes,
Okay, is there a second to that
thank you.
proposed amendment? Second. Okay, Ms. Snowdoxy, any more comments? Are you all set?
Nope, that's,
Okay. Further
Thank
discussion on the proposed amendment? Ms. Binder?
Thank you, Angela Binda, Precinct 5. I'm a member of the Recreation Committee. I'm not speaking for the Recreation Committee, but I am a member. We had a meeting not that long ago where a proposal was put forth to put pickleball lines on tennis courts, and there was a lot of public comment about it. The Recreation Committee understands that there's a great need and desire for more pickleball courts. Technically, a lot of the courts are tennis courts, and the Recreation Committee came up with a compromise to put pickleball lines on some of the courts, but not all of the courts that were asked for. We thought it was a good proposal. We can't do that without it going before the Select Board, because the Select Board is in charge of fields and courts. So even though the Recreation Committee was in favor of putting down tape line and allowing for more use for pickleball courts, it's really more complicated than town meeting approving, let's make them pickleball courts. So while I understand the desire, I'm going to vote against this just because I don't think this is the place to be doing that, and the Recreation Committee and the town is working to get more pickleball courts, but it's more complicated than that. Thank you.
Further discussion on the proposed amendment? Yes, Mr. O'Neill.
John O'Neill, Precinct 6. I have a question. The amount of money that was, estimated that didn't necessarily include pickleball courts, I'd just like to know, is it going to be sufficient if you add that, or do we have to add money as well?
Mr. Maltese?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I think it'd be hard to answer that question on the spot, right? I mean, I think as an aim, we could try to, make courts multifunctional, right? So that they can accommodate multiple sports. And actually, at the Select Board's meeting tomorrow night, members of the Recreation Committee are presenting some proposals to do this. So it's really hard to say at this moment if this money is enough.
Further discussion? Yes, Mr. Bacci?
Carlo Bacci, Precinct 5. So Angela is correct on Recreation Committee had a meeting, and a lot of tennis people and a lot of pickleball people came to that meeting, and to try to put tape or chalk some lines at Bancroft, and temporarily, probably for the next week until the tennis nets come down and the lights get turned off. And that was decided that that wasn't a good idea. But the reason for that, to give you a little background, is that yes, phase 2 of Birch Meadow does include 8 pickleball courts with lights. And unfortunately, in a few towns that have spent a lot of money, hundreds of thousands of dollars on pickleball courts and lights, because it's a lot different than tennis and a lot louder than tennis, the neighbors spoke against it after they're already built based on the noise. So they either cut the hours back or you can only play at certain times. So for Birch Meadow, obviously the pickleball community would support 8 courts with lights. But there's a concern in the future that noise could be a potential factor for that neighborhood. So what the pickleball community response to that was, let us chalk some lines. When I say us, I'm a member of the pickleball community. Let us chalk some lines at some community parks. Washington Park, Memorial Park is already lined for pickleball, dual use, tennis and pickleball, just to see the impact on the neighborhoods. If the neighbors complain, if it's too loud, obviously now you can only play till 4:30, and it's too dark. So we've played a few times at Washington Park. Obviously the chalk washes away with rain, and so there wasn't enough impact to see if anyone was going to complain. So while I support this for many reasons, I guess the question on the second part, the second part is, it says field playground court improvements, field court including improvements. It doesn't, what are we improving in that part? I don't know if Ms. Doxer thought of that. Like right now, all we have is Memorial. So the plan for Sturgis was, the best plan, I think, is to make it dual use, this is my opinion, or add pickleball courts there. But again, there's a neighborhood there, and we don't know the impact. Dual use serves a dual purpose. Like our town manager said, our Turf 1 and Turf 2 have multi-uses. So I fully support Sturgis being dual use, and the pickleball community would support that as well. And for the second part, I guess, what does, what are we sponsoring there? What are we gonna do? Barrows as well? Like that's the only question I have on that one. Obviously, I support it, but I don't know where, because it says, there's not dedicated pickleball courts yet. So if we're going to improve or add, I guess that has to be worked out. Thanks.
Further discussion? Mr. Brown?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Bill Brown, Precinct 8. There was a mention of pickleball courts going into the Birch Meadow area. I would suggest to you very strongly that will increase the impervious surface, and we cannot do that under the agreement when they built this building with the State Building Committee at that time. We have reached the maximum amount of impervious surface we can put on the Birch Meadow area. And that was part of the agreement when we got the funding for this building. Thank you.
Further discussion? Yes.
Mark Ventura, Precinct 2. As far as the amendment's concerned, I don't know if it's really going to do anything. I do support pickleball. When I was out in the Little League fields, I saw, young, old adults playing pickleball. I thought it was great. I wish I could play probably when I'm that age. I don't know if I can. But what about that new piece of property we purchased down Simmons Way, that when it was purchased a few years ago from the Zanis, there was talk about maybe a baseball field, but there's not enough room there for a ball field or anything like that. With the money you'd save on the Birch Meadow project, it could offset the cost for clearing that and putting in a dedicated pickleball area. You have parking, you have woods to buffer the noise. I mean, if you put a pickleball court, it is loud. In any of those, Sturgis or anywhere else, the neighbors will have the same argument as the neighbors at Birch Meadow. Just a thought. But I do support pickleball in the community.
Mr. Maltese, did you have a comment? Yeah.
Thank you. Yes, I'll just say 3 points of clarification. The first one is that this line item is to resurface the tennis courts at the Barrows Elementary School. So that is what that line item is for. With regards to phase 2 of the Birch Meadow, the idea is to basically redesign the existing basketball courts into pickleball courts and do some shifting around, basically in that area. It wouldn't add in any additional land takings. And on Simon's Way, the select board is actually tomorrow voting the final member for the Simon's Way exploratory committee that is going to pursue, all the options there. Thank you.
Further discussion on the proposed amendment? Yes.
I feel fancy. Emily Sisson, Precinct 2, former member of the Recreation Committee. I've been talking about pickleball forever. And so Mr. Bocci mentioned that maybe making it dual for the first part of the amendment with the Sturgis would be a good idea, but we've heard repeatedly from the tennis community that making a tennis court dual with pickleball doesn't work for them and their lines or site, or I don't play either, so I don't really know. But I'd be worried about his additional point that it's in a neighborhood, so if it becomes too loud and the neighbors at Sturgis complain, then you have a court that is lined for both tennis and pickleball and then will be used for neither. So, well, I'm very excited about the thought of pickleball players getting their own dedicated space. I don't know that doing it at Sturgis at this juncture without further research from the rec committee and the select board is well advised. So, thanks.
Further discussion on the proposed amendment? Yes, right over here.
Hi, Charlotte Lestrade, Precinct 5. I vote that we table this discussion until Recreation has an opportunity to make their proposal to Select Board, and we can then further discuss.
Further discussion on the amendment, the proposed amendment? Seeing none, are we ready for the vote? All those in favor, please raise your... Where? Oh, I'm sorry. Ms. Binder.
Angela Binda, Precinct 5. Just clarification, because I don't know what the improvements are. There are no pickleball courts. It just says field playground. There are no pickleball courts at the place where this says?
That is correct.
So
There are no
so you can't improve a pickleball court that doesn't exist? You can't improve it. It doesn't exist. So this is for court improvements for basketball courts and for tennis courts. So if the pickleball courts don't actually exist, you can't actually improve them. Thank you.
Further discussion? This gentleman in the back, are you asking to speak? Did not see your hand.
Philip Dardino, Precinct 3. I'd like to second her motion. Put it to vote.
Is there further discussion on the proposed amendment? Yes, Ms. Snowdoxer?
I just wanted to clarify my second point. So when I read court improvements, I read fields, playground, court improvements. So improving the fields and the playgrounds potentially including pickleball courts. So that's the way I was reading where the money would be going to improve the field, the playground, and the courts. So I just wanted pickleball to be specifically mentioned as well. But I understand if there aren't any pickleball courts, I understand that argument, and I've appreciated a lot more of the background now. Thank you.
Further discussion? Yes, in the
Jennifer Hillary, Precinct 4. Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Just for clarification, as a pickleball player and a tennis player, pickleball is actually played on tennis courts in our community. So, Ms. Doxer, you're not wrong in thinking that an improvement to a tennis court could benefit the pickleball community. The concern that I would just like to echo is that this matter has been under extensive discussion in the rec department, and at this point there has been no vote by that department, from what I understand, to play pickleball at the Barrows tennis courts or the Sturgis tennis courts. There was only a vote, as Select Board Member Bocci mentioned, to play pickleball at the Washington Street courts. So I am going to vote against this, as much as I support the idea of pickleball being played in our community, just because of what we have heard regarding the rec department already voting on this issue, and that Select Board is hearing further about this. Thank you.
Yes, in the back row.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator, town meeting members. I'm the Precinct 6, Chuck Robinson. I'm also the school liaison to the Recreation Committee, and I, too, was at that meeting and heard the pickleball community loud and clear, as well as the tennis. And I support pickleball, but I think we're getting ahead of ourselves here. We need to hear from what the recreation proposal is, and we've made we made an agreement with the to put chalk lines. Someone said tape. Definitely not tape. It's chalk lines at Washington Park, and the season's almost done at this point, and I think that's going to get them through that. And I just think we got to slow down on this, and there's a lot of we got to hear that proposal and potentially what could happen with the Simon's Way. And then also there's still a lot of discussion about the pickleball courts that are in the Birch Meadow master plan that we talked about that night. Thank you.
Further discussion on the proposed amendment? None appearing? Are we ready for the vote? All those in favor of the proposed amendment, please raise your hand. Those opposed? And the motion does not carry. We're now back to the main motion under Article 3. Further discussion? Yes.
Nancy Doctor, Precinct 1. I just wanted to ask, are the firearms destroyed that are being replaced?
The firearms are being replaced.
Are
Sorry.
they being destroyed before they're replaced? What
They
happens?
They are being traded in with the same manufacturer that we are buying them from.
So they're resold, not destroyed.
They are handed back to the manufacturer.
Okay, thank you.
Or, yeah.
Further discussion? Yes, Mr. Barnes?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Jonathan Barnes, Precinct 5. Just a quick question, and I know this is not spending any money at this point, and it's only the capital improvement plan, but in FY24, there's $65,000 to the schools for card readers. So just wanted to have some clarification what those are.
Do we have an answer? Oh, okay, good.
1 second.
Good question, yeah.
That's just adding additional card readers at some school locations.
Is that for entry and exit?
I really can't say where they're going to be, only because it's security items, but
Okay, thank you. And is it contemplated for all of the schools or particular schools?
it's going to touch most of the schools, I can tell you that.
Thank you.
Before we proceed, we need to get a FinCom report.
Hi, Mark Zarrow, Precinct 1, and a member of the FinCom Committee. On October 19th, we met and on an 8-0 vote, recommend the approval of Article 3.
Do you have a vote on that? 8-0. 8-0 is the vote. Okay. Further discussion on Article 3? Yes, Mr. Sasso.
Just a quick point of order. If we could ask when speakers approach the microphone, if they could, get close so people can hear the volume. It's awful low. So I appreciate if you guys could just, hopefully everybody can hear me speaking in like this. If you guys could do that, I'd greatly appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Up here, we didn't notice that, but thank you. Okay, further discussion? Is there, did I see a hand? No. All right, are we ready for the vote? All those in favor of the motion under Article 3, please raise your hand. Those opposed? And the motion carries. Business under Article 4, Ms. Angstrom.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Can you hear me? Okay. This article authorizes changes to the fiscal 23 budget. Before I get started going through the changes, I wanted to mention that you're going to see throughout the slide. Is it a little closer? It doesn't come any closer. Okay. Is it up? Can everybody hear me? Yes, okay. So before I go through the slides for Article 4, I just want to explain something that you're going to see in multiple departments throughout Article 4. So last year, we hired a consultant to do a pay-in-class study for the non-union staff. And we built $85,000 into the fiscal 23 budget to cover some of the changes. And what that study was to do is it was going to look at our job descriptions here at the town for non-union staff and our pay ranges and compare them to our 22 peer communities that were identified by FinCom. The intent of that was to determine if our pay ranges were competitive with our peers. And the hope is that making these adjustments that were recommended by the consultant will help us with employee retention, but also when hiring, we've struggled quite a bit in recent years. So you're going to see some paying class adjustments that were recommended by the consultant. So on the first line, B99 for benefits. Benefits is an area that we tend to be very conservative when we budget, but then we use the excess, if there is any, to help us fund other changes later in the budget. So there's $245,000 of decreases in areas of workers' comp insurance. The pension assessment was slightly higher than what it actually ended up being, and health insurance, $80,000. So that $245,000 is going to be reallocated throughout this article. On C99 for capital, 205 is the items that we're looking to fund this article, mentioning in the prior article that the $200,000 for the reclamation is going to be requested in April. The vocational school is in need of an additional $30,000. When we project the budget, we don't always know the enrollment at those schools, and then once we know it, we usually adjust at a future town meeting. Then we also have for FinCom reserves, we have a reimbursement going back to FinCom reserves for a change that we had to make our veterans agent a full-time position. So the prior position was held by a veteran who had shared, he had actually been promoted to community services director and veterans agent. He retired last June, and his replacement is not a veteran. So you actually have to be a veteran to be a veterans agent. And so we needed to add funding to make that position full-time so we could hire a full-time person because our size requires us by law to have a full-time person there. So that's $30,000 that FinCom funded that we're reimbursing so that they have the full $200,000 to use for unforeseen events coming up. G91, administrative services wages, that's the first area we're going to see adjustments that have been proposed by the consultant of $22,000. And under administrative services expenses, we have property and casualty insurance was $87,000 higher than we had budgeted, and that kind of fluctuates based on claims, so we need to make the adjustment as we got the bill and saw that our projection was not correct. And then, as I mentioned before, the pay and class expenses, $85,000 was built into this budget, and that was in the administrative services department. So I'm reducing that budget to reallocate it to the departments. The total of the changes recommended by the consultant were $160,000 approximately, and out of the $85,000 we already have, we're going to be requesting an additional $75,000 to cover the changes. Public services wages, we have vacation buybacks. That's related to people leaving, and we have to pay out their vacation time or retiring. And so we don't know that when we're building the budget, so we tend to ask for them when we learn of them. There was a request to make the senior center receptionist full-time. It has always been part-time. That $22,000 will bring that position up to full-time, and then another pay and class adjustment there. In public safety, we have pay and class adjustments there. You'll notice they're smaller because in public safety, most of the positions are union, not non-union. So you have fewer employees that it's addressing. In finance, we have a vacation buyback for several people that had left in this fiscal year or are planning to leave. And so that's that. And then the treasurer transition, one of those people who left was our treasurer. He is staying on to help train the new treasurer. So we have kind of a overlap there that we're looking to fund, and the pay and class adjustment proposed by the consultant. Public Works, again, is another department that's mostly union but does have non-union staff, so the pay and class adjustment is smaller. Public Works is requesting a pedestrian traffic improvement study, which costs $40,000. Library pay and class adjustment of $23,000. And then the town building facilities has vacation buyback for retirees and people that have left this year. The grand total, or the net total, is $291,000 that we're proposing we use free cash to fund.
FinCom report?
Joe McDonough, Finance Committee. On October 19th, 2022, Finance Committee met and recommended this article to town meeting by a vote of 8-0.
Thank you. Further discussion on motion on Article 4. Mr. Brown?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Having observed the veterans agents for a couple of years now, I will tell you, he earns his money, and if he doesn't get things back straight, the money does not come back to the town. And the former veterans agent is now on island, and he called me the other day and said he had a traffic jam. The goats wouldn't get out of the road.
Mr. Ventura? Oh, excuse me 1 second. It's a point of order. Okay, Mr. Brown, could you repeat that? Apparently it was not heard through the auditorium. And then we'll get right back to you, Mr. Ventura.
Thank you. I'll speak up a little louder. Having observed the last two veterans agents, they do put in a great deal of work. Some of it's state, some of it's federal, and if they don't get it right, we do not get the reimbursement back from the state. So I encourage you to go for the extra 30,000. Thank you.
Mr. Ventura?
Mark Ventura, Precinct 2. I saw a line item, a $40,000 feasibility study for pedestrian access at Birch Meadow. I've sat here at town meeting probably for like 5 years, and we've been talking about the Birch Meadow master plan in brief or in detail, whatever, for those 5 years. Now we're going to spend another $40K for a feasibility study for something that should already be included in that, or, I mean, what's going on with that? Are we just going to throw $40,000 out, build a couple sidewalks, tear them up in 4 years, or talk about it for another 10? What's happening with that? I don't see why we're spending $40K on something that should already be planned for, or at least I would hope we've gone past a sidewalk stage of it.
Mr. Maltese?
Thank you very much. So the Birch Meadow master plan, right, is a look at the fields, right? So for example, the phase 1 is being funded by ARPA, and it includes the spine walkway, a gazebo, a lacrosse wall, and redoing the parking lot at Imagination Station. I'll also say that the Birch Meadow master plan is looking at the area inside of the complex, if you will. So what we're asking for here is in my short time here, we've heard a lot of complaints, right, on walkability, on traffic, on the lack of sidewalks, right, on not only Oakland Road, but the surrounding streets as well. So one example is Parkview Road and Auburn Street. Another one is Hillside Road. So what this is doing, essentially, is we're going to use these funds to tap into some some state grants. We submitted the first grant already, and if we receive it, it will fund sidewalks on Auburn Street and Parkview Road. The next phase is essentially building sidewalks on Hillside Road and potentially the surrounding streets around the complex.
It's more about access to this grand master plan that is in the works. And when is phase, I mean, I think the first was really the lights. Well, that was part of the field revisions, which we needed because they didn't meet the requirements. But what about the lights at Moscarelli Field, Majors Field, the other lights? I mean, I'm beyond that now in my life, but it'd be great for the community.
Absolutely.
I know it's part of the plan. Is what's the schedule on those?
So we received $1.5 million from ARPA, right? And one of the reports on the warrant is from the committee that worked on this. We are hoping to begin phase one sometime this summer, right? And once we do that, we'll shift to what phase two looks like, and we're hoping that phase two is that it's the pickleball courts, resurfacing the tennis courts, and including the lights around Majors Field.
All right, no, excellent. I just want to make sure there's no overlap with that scope.
Thank you.
Further discussion? Yes. Ms. Lestrade?
Cheryl Lestrade, Precinct 5. So I see a lot of money being held aside for vacation buybacks. Isn't there any way that instead of holding all this money aside for vacation buyback, that we encourage people to use the vacation while they have it, use it or lose it, instead of paying them at the end in such large sums?
Mr. Maltese?
Thank you very much. So we absolutely encourage our employees to take vacation. However, in our personnel policies, if someone is going to retire and they give us 6 months notice, then they are eligible for this. So it doesn't happen often, and I think in many ways it's to encourage, a long notice for retiring employees. So it is only for retiring employees if they give six months notice.
Further discussion? None appearing? Are we ready for the vote? All those in favor of the motion under Article 4, please raise your hand. Those opposed? And the motion carries. Business under Article 5, I believe the plan is to table that, lay that on the table. Is that correct? Yeah. Yes? Okay. Pardon me? Yes. Tabling is not a debatable motion, but we always allow a brief explanation as to why it's being tabled. So, Ms. Angstrom?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. We do not have any prior year bills to pay, and so we are asking to table the article.
Okay, and just as a brief explanation, most articles that we decide not to take up, we indefinitely postpone. This is an exception because there's always the chance something could come up during the meeting, so we always lay this one on the table as opposed to indefinitely postponing. Okay, are we ready for the vote to lay this article on the table? All those in favor, please raise your hand. Do we have a point of order? I'm sorry. Oh, okay. Okay, yeah, this is a little different than others because there's always a chance something could come up during the life of this meeting. So we lay it on the table just in that case, but usually we would indefinitely postpone. Okay, all those in favor of laying the substance of this article on the table, please raise your hand. Those opposed? It carries, and the motion is laid, the article is laid on the table. Article 6, Mr. Maltese.
Thank you very much. In the warrant book, there is quite a lot of detail on this article and what we are requesting for you tonight. But just to give a little background, in April, town meeting passed an instructional motion for us to revisit essentially how the Affordable Housing Trust Fund in Reading is structured. We have done a lot of research and benchmarked with our peer communities. We have discussed this at different committees, including CPDC, the Reading Housing Authority Board, and the Select Board. What we are requesting from town meeting is essentially boiled down to 5 actions, which I'll explain. So the first action, which is shown on page 14 of your booklet, essentially is to repeal the special act from 2001 that created what we have today. This is required legally, and it is done through a home rule petition process. So the first action will be for town meeting to authorize the Select Board to submit a home rule petition as shown on page 14 of the warrant booklet. And what we are asking for is essentially for the legislature to repeal that special act from 2001 and to allow any of the funds that are currently in place in our current fund to move into action item number 2, which is Reading passed in 2001, basically a special act. However, in 2005, the legislature made the Affordable Housing Trust Funds into Mass General Law. So we were, in many ways, as we have discussed before, very ahead of the game in this regard. So as action number 2, what we are asking for is to adopt Mass General Law, Chapter 44, Section 55C, which would essentially allow us to create a Reading Affordable Housing Trust Fund that is governed by the existing Mass General Law. Once you adopt this Mass General Law, we are required to essentially adopt a bylaw. So a bylaw that will govern the new Affordable Housing Trust Fund. That bylaw in its entirety is shown in page 15 and page 16 of your booklets, and actually 17 as well. And I'll just say that just the highlights of this bylaw is that we essentially adopted the majority of what is already in Mass General Law. So for the most part, it is essentially what is already Mass General Law. There's a few caveats or a few changes from that, and the main one is that this new board or this new fund requires the vote of the Select Board to borrow money, mortgage, pledge trust assets, or purchase, sell, lease, exchange, transfer, or abandon interest in real property. So essentially, this is a safeguard that the Select Board has put in place in order to ensure that this trust fund board remains compliant with the spirit of the Select Board. Action number 4 is a housekeeping item. It is to amend our existing bylaw, section 3.3.1.5, to basically incorporate this new board. And finally, action number 5 is to allow this new board to file a declaration and certification of trust with the registry.
All set? Okay, Bylaw Committee report, Mr. Struble.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. At our meeting of October 11th, the Bylaw Committee voted 5-0 to recommend the content of this article to town meeting.
Thank you. FinCom report.
Joe Kernahan, Precinct 6, member of Finance Committee. At our meeting on October 19th, 2022, Finance Committee voted 8-0 to recommend the substance of this article to town meeting.
Thank you. I know we have two proposed amendments. We will take them one at a time. The first one by Ms. Snow Doxer.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Linda Snow Doxer, Precinct 1. I appreciate how many meetings and how much work has been done to prepare these motions. I only wish I could go to all of these meetings. So I did propose an amendment to make it easier if it was decided this would be helpful. I'd love to learn more about the rationale. This amendment is for 3.3.7.2. It regards the membership of the trust fund committee. When I looked up Chapter 44, it said that the town can adopt the powers of the board, all of which shall be carried out in furtherance of the purposes set forth in this act, shall include the following powers, but a city or town may by ordinance or bylaw omit or modify any of these powers and may grant to the board additional powers consistent with this section. Under membership, my question was, I don't see any representation for the tenants on this trust. And so I'd like to know if that is feasible to have in my amendment, I suggested that someone that has been living in affordable housing for a year and has the plan, of course that can always change, but to be in residence for 2 more years because the term is supposed to be, I believe, those 2 years. So I'd really like to learn more about whether that would be feasible. At the Affordable Housing Forum, we did discuss representation and protection for our tenants in affordable housing. Thank you.
Okay, Town Council.
Thank you. That would be a legally acceptable amendment. Whether it's feasible or not, I can't speak to that, but it would be legally permissible to make that change.
Are you planning on making that amendment or proposed amendment? Just to be clear.
Sure, thank you. Then I will make that amendment.
Okay. And can we have that put up? Do we have that? All right.
Thank you.
All right. While she's typing, do we have a second? Second, okay. And do you have further comments?
No, I just would like to see the tenants represented and protected as well in our affordable housing plans.
All right.
Thank you.
Further discussion on the proposed amendment? Not appearing. Are we ready? Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, down on the Finance Committee. Okay, yes. Ms. Downey? Yeah.
Thank you, Mary Ann Downing, Precinct 4 and Finance Committee, but I'm speaking as a Precinct 4 member. I have a question about your proposed language because you say the other 3 members, each of whom shall, to the extent possible, shall have a background or interest in affordable housing, finance, law, et cetera, and then you also say one of the members should be a resident. So are you saying a resident must not only be a resident, but must have this requisite background? Because that's how it reads. Or do you just want them to just be a resident?
Maybe we should wait
Thank
till
you.
we
I'm
get it up
still
there.
Linda Snow Doxer, Precinct 1. Thank you for that question. I read that as or background or interest in affordable housing. So if the tenant has an interest in that but doesn't necessarily have training, then they would still be qualified if they have an interest in maintaining the quality of the affordable housing.
So,
Ms. Downing?
so just to follow up, like, I mean, anyone could have an interest in affordable housing. It's really not a requirement because, like, a background, anyone can say they have an interest in affordable housing. How do you say they don't? Like how would you enforce this part of the provision to determine how you would
Well, I think that a resident also has a different kind of investment in affordable housing.
Oh, I meant the other members too, not, I understand the resident part now, but like the other members. You're saying to the extent possible, you can recognize someone with a background in finance, law, land use, but interest is kind of all encompassing, right? Anybody can have an interest?
That's the original motion.
Okay, I'm sorry. So you just want to add the requirement of a resident?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Further discussion on the proposed amendment? Yes, Mr. Sasso.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. John Sasso, Precinct 2. Just a question. Does this represent a conflict of interest in the way this board is set up? Because from reading the responsibilities, effectively what I see left after you take out, interest in real property and all that other stuff is basically funding that can be used to basically fix up affordable housing effectively is one of the funding pieces. So I'm just curious, having a resident on that board, if that's a conflict. Thank you.
Town Council?
Thank you. So under the state ethics law, there is an exemption from the general prohibition in Section 19, which talks about having financial interest in a matter. If you are on our board or committee, because you are, pursuant to bylaw, required to be there to represent a specified group. So in this case, this individual would be representing members of the affordable housing community. So they could act on matters that would generally affect the affordable housing community equally. If there was a specific matter that spoke just to them, so for example, a specific improvement on their floor or within their building, then they would be precluded from participating in that specific vote, but they could still participate on the general matters that would affect all members equally.
Further discussion on the proposed amendment? Yes.
Hi, Barry Berman, Precinct 6. I plan on speaking in favor of this later on, but I just want to address the particular amendment here. The universe of people who are current residents of affordable housing in Reading is considerably small. Hopefully, one day it will become bigger. But right now, that universe is small. So if for some reason this is adopted and no one steps forward who is a tenant or an owner, affordable housing doesn't have to be people who are renting, could be people who are owners as well. If that can't be filled by someone in that category, does that mean that the board can only appoint 4 members and not 5? So that's my concern. I would hope that people would step up, but if they can't, we're saying that that seat can't be filled, and therefore now we only have 4 people rather than 5 doing the work. So I would ask if the maker of the amendment would consider this a friendly amendment, that we leave it the way it is, but add a sentence that says something along the lines of, the select board shall make every effort to include as one of the 3 people interested in affordable housing a current resident of an existing of our affordable housing. This way we can fill all 5 seats, but also still encourage and make it sort of our policy that we would like to see a current resident of affordable housing sitting on the board. So if that be considered a friendly amendment?
Well, we would need exact wording. We need to know exactly what we would be voting on. So first of all, you'd have to arrange with that mover, then we could ask the body if there's any objection to it. But we need the exact wording for that.
The select board shall make every effort to fill these 3 seats with a current resident of affordable housing. I mean, I'm making it up on the fly.
I know, which is not good policy. Yeah, we need something.
The notion is that we would encourage that seat to be filled, but we want to be able to fill all 5 seats and protect against the event that we can't find someone who fulfills that criteria.
Right. I understand what you're trying to do, but we need. If you wanted to propose an amendment to the amendment, I would allow that.
I would like to do that. I would like to do that.
Okay. Can you get the exact wording then?
Okay. Add the words "to the extent possible."
To the extent possible. That's, okay, so now we have a proposed amendment to the amendment. Let's make sure we get it up there so people understand it. Is that it? Is that what your intention is?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Well, is there further discussion on the proposed amendment to the amendment? Yes, Ms. Lestrade?
I'm going to go against that and leave it the way it was because I believe that the select board can find tenants that in the affordable housing area that would definitely prove not only interested, but have a say-so in how things are going and how things are voted on.
Further discussion on the, yes, Ms. Landry?
Ann Landry, Precinct 5. Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I would vote against this further amendment as I do think it weakens the underlying purpose of ensuring adequate representation for impacted communities. I think that with this proposed language, it would be possible under the language really for the board to just kind of pay lip service to an effort, not that I would assume any ill intent among the sitting board members, but it sort of weakens the possibility of adequate representation by kind of providing a loophole for just trying to do, make some kind of effort or endeavor, but not really going out of the way to ensure that adequate representation. Thank you.
Yes, Ms. Snowdoxer?
Still me, Precinct 1. I actually would vote against this for the same reason that Ms. Landry just said. It's too easy not to try very hard, and I think people are very busy. So again, I'm not attributing malintent at all, but I think with the effort, we would find people that would be even eager to be on this board. And I think it's really, really important to have tenant representation, whether they're owners or whatever, but people who are in affordable housing to have a voice. So I would not vote yes on this. And I think that having a space on the board would be very motivational to find someone. So I would not accept it as a friendly amendment either. Thank you.
Okay, further discussion on the proposed, yes.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Vanessa Alvarado, Precinct 5. In an effort to find compromise with Mr. Berman's concern about having all positions filled, and Ms. Landry and others' observations about having that representation not being important, I would suggest a friendly amendment to Mr. Berman's amendment, which would state, the Select Board will prioritize for membership for one person who is a resident in affordable housing to fill one of the 5 seats. In the event a resident of affordable housing cannot be found any other applicant may be considered.
You good with it? Is there any objection to making that part of Mr. Berman's motion? We have an objection? No? Okay. All right, then that,
I think we might need it repeated, Vanessa.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you. Ms. Freed, I couldn't hear what you,
The question is whether Vanessa could bring the computer down to help with the,
Do you want me to just, yeah.
or repeating it, sorry, thanks.
Okay. Do you want me to just type it up, or do you want me to email it to you? Okay. The select board will prioritize for membership for one person who is a resident in affordable housing to fill one of the 5 seats. Is it 3? Sorry, did I get that wrong? 5? 3. Oh, excuse me, 3, sorry. One of the 3 seats in the event a resident of affordable housing cannot be found, any other applicant may be considered. Oh, shoot, sorry. Cannot be found. Any other applicant may be considered.
The top portion will go away, right?
Yes, I think that's it. You might need a period in there somewhere, but I'll let the grammar people do it.
all right. Do we have that up there? Again, I'll ask, is there any objection to that being Mr. Burns? Yes, Ms., you have an objection to that? Okay, then we'll have to take a vote on whether or not, we'll go back to Mr. Berman's, and then we'll accept that as another amendment later on if it doesn't pass. No, Mr. Berman is trying to amend Ms. Snowdoxer's. Right, and then. Right, okay. So what the purpose is, Mr. Berman made a proposed amendment to the amendment, and then there's been a potential replacement to that, which Mr. Berman said he was okay with. So what I'm asking right now, is there an objection to replacing Mr. Berman's proposed amendment to the amendment with the new, okay, and you still object, which means that we cannot just accept it as a friendly amendment, then we'll have to take a vote. Mr. Berman?
Withdraw my amendment.
Okay. Right. Okay, well, so is there an objection to withdrawing Mr. Berman's amendment? And if we have to, we'll come back to that if you still want to do that. So right now, we are back to the original proposed amendment by Ms. Snowdoxer. Everyone understand that? Ms. Snowdoxer?
I'm sorry, I am confused. So I thought that Mr. Berman and, I thought that that was an amendment separate from mine.
No.
And then we consider that amendment, and then we go back to mine if that's voted down.
No, what he was proposing was an amendment to your proposed amendment, but he has since withdrawn that. Now, there was a potential change to that, which there was an objection to just accepting it, so we would have had to take a vote, but Mr. Berman has since withdrawn that. He may come back with another proposed amendment, depending on what happens with yours. So right now, what is on the floor is your original proposed amendment.
So that is not my wording for my amendment.
Right, so we need to go back to the wording from Ms. Snowdoxer's. I think she's working on it right now.
Okay,
Okay. Again, just to reiterate, we're going back to the original proposed amendment by Ms. Snowdoxer without any potential changes to it.
Thank you.
Okay, while we're typing this up, is there further discussion? Mr. O'Neill?
John O'Neill, Precinct 6. I'm supportive of the original amendment of Ms. Doxer, and I definitely would be opposed to the modification that was suggested by Ms. Alvarado, because I think it's a solution to a problem that doesn't exist. It's just hypothetical. And you start going down that road, you can get into all sorts of difficulties. And the odds are that you're going to be able to find someone. And I do think, actually, that the person who spoke to that, the town meeting member who spoke to that, is also an affordable housing tenant, as she has indicated in the past. So I don't think that the difficulty exists.
Further discussion? Yes, in the back. I can't quite see who it is. Oh, okay.
Has anyone seconded any of these amendments?
Yes, I did call for a second.
Okay.
Yep. Further discussion? One right in the back row, yes.
Maureen Hurley, Precinct 3. I would be against voting for this amendment as is. I think the addendum that was made by Ms. Alvarado makes sense. What I can't understand is why people who wanted to add this would effectively want to bar a seat from being filled, because that's what that term, even if we can find someone every single time, you are assuming that it won't be a problem. That's what we are here to do, is to work out the wording so that we don't run into a problem down the road. So it is best to cover the bases and make the friendly amendment, add it to that, and then move forward. Thank you.
Further discussion? Mr. Cool?
Stephen Cool, Precinct 6. I'm opposed to this amendment. I don't think it is appropriate for someone who is benefiting from the reduced costs and other possible benefits of affordable housing to have a vote in the on the board. At most, I would support someone being included in an advisory capacity, so that the board always knows that it has someone responsible for input from those people who are benefiting from the affordable housing. So I urge a rejection of any amendment of this type.
Right here.
Anne Marie Corey, Precinct 5. Just in response to the former comment there, I believe Town Council has already established that there wouldn't be a conflict of interest for a person who is voting on this board. So I would continue to support this. I think that it's important to have all voices at the table, and that it shouldn't matter how much you pay for your housing.
Yes, Ms. Downing?
I got a little lost of how we went from Ms. Alvarado's proposal of 5 down to 3, but I just wanted to point out that it's possible. I was just looking up the Reading Housing Authority, and one of the members is supposed to be a tenant of affordable housing, so conceivably the Reading Housing Authority member could meet the criteria of a resident. Conceivably, one of the select board members could also be a resident of affordable housing. So that's why I would have supported it to be back to 5, because it could be anyone, not just one of the 3, but it could be one of the select board members or a housing authority member who is a resident as well. Thank you.
Further discussion on the proposed amendment? Ms. Landry?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Ann Landry, Precinct 5. I do support the amendment as proposed by Ms. Doxer, and I appreciate Mr. Berman and Ms. Alvarado's attempts to make sure that we have an opportunity to fill all seats. I don't think in other contexts, however, we usually go to an extra effort to ensure, well, what if we can't find a member of the business community to fill the seat, or we can't find a member of the housing authority, or we can't find a select board member? And I think in this situation, we should also be able to find a resident in affordable housing. With respect to Ms. Alvarado's alternative proposal, I think that in practice could actually be less effective in ensuring adequate representation than Mr. Berman's proposal, because it said that preference should be given to one resident in affordable housing. The way that would read to me is that the VASC would look at their applicant pool, and if there is a member in affordable housing, that applicant would be given preference, but there wouldn't be any additional requirement for recruitment among residents in affordable housing for the position. It also would not really allow, if there were two folks who might apply and be part of the applicant pool who are residents in affordable housing, I'm not sure that the amendment offered by Ms. Alvarado would really solve for how the select board would identify or fill those seats if there were more than one applicant in affordable housing under the language that was proposed under her alternative. So all that to say that I do support the amendment as it appears on the screen. Thank you.
Just to be clear, we are back to the motion originally made by Ms. Snowdoxer. Ms. Alvarado's amendment is not on the floor right now. I saw a hand way up the back. Yes.
Shirley Jia, Precinct 6. One of the members mentioned, I think it was me, I'm a affordable housing beneficiary, and I still live in the affordable housing I purchased. So first, I want to address the interest for people who want to be represented in the very fund that's supposed to get some fund from the general public and used for people who needed it. And secondly, I want to address the conflict of interest. So first, I don't think there's an issue for people to want to be in the board. I think the issue really is how we deliver the message, let people to know there's their opportunity to participate in this fund as in any capacity. So in that reason, I think the language currently is better than the previous proposal of Endeavor to find such membership. Secondly, the conflict of interest. If you refer to page 15 to 16, the authority of this board is clearly defined under section 375, general duties. So anyone who's in the membership cannot benefit him or herself. This is general duty to make sure the fund is used for the public benefits, not benefit a certain person. So I support this language. I just want to make, if I may, a suggestion. The last part of the sentence of at least the 2-year term, I want to make sure the person who's selected is still have the residency in the preceding 2 or 3 years, because the language as it's written, so person could be a affordable housing resident, but long gone, from the property or no longer live in that property as owner or tenants.
So are you proposing an amendment?
I don't know the procedure, if I may, just adding a defined word.
If I could just clarify, so the members of this trust are appointed by the select board for a 2-year term. 2-year term. So and they are reappointed every 2 years potentially. So what this is saying is that anyone who is going to serve on the board for those 2-year terms must live for at least one of those 2 years in affordable housing. It doesn't say that there is no limits before or after that person is no longer on the board.
Okay. Thank you.
Further discussion? Yes, right in the corner. Mr. Horn?
Bernie Horn, Precinct 1. I just want to make a clarification here. Should it say shall be a resident in affordable housing in the town of Reading? Otherwise, any affordable housing resident from anywhere in the country could be on the board.
Do we have an answer on that?
Do you mean that any resident from anywhere in the country could be here, or should this resident be in the town, affordable housing in the
Mr.
town
Maltese?
of Reading?
Please, one at a time, please, Mr. Maltese.
Sorry, yeah. In order to serve in any board in Reading, you must be a registered voter of Reading.
Okay. And that includes this board, obviously, right?
Absolutely.
Okay. Mr. Haley?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Christopher Haley on the Select Board as well as the VAST Committee. Sorry. I just want to add some clarity for everybody thinking that this position is going to be immediately filled. There are 17 boards or committees in Reading that have vacancies on them, of which there's 35 vacancies total. 5 of them on the Conservation Committee, 5 of them on the Rec Committee. And if that just seems shocking to you that there's 5 people missing from the Rec Committee, what makes you think that if we pigeonhole any of these down to one particular person, that we're not dwindling the pool of applicants? Because to me, it was shocking just to see that the Rec Committee itself had 5 vacancies on it. Everyone here is probably concerned about rec, pickleball, et cetera. That was just discussed. Same thing with conservation coming up in the future, and there is that many vacancies in there. So I would just, for me, it makes sense in the spirit to appoint someone like Vanessa and Barry had mentioned, but I just would caution you to just assuming that this is going to be filled with so many vacancies currently on our boards and committees. Thanks.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Ed Ross, Precinct 5. Move the question.
You're moving the question on the proposed amendment, I assume? Yes. We have this will end debate on the proposed amendment. This requires a 2/3 vote, so we will need a standing count. Let's see, could I call on Mr. Sasso to do the right plus the Finance Committee? Mr. O'Neill, would you take the center on your side? Let's see, over here, Mr. Struble, would you take this side of the center? And Ms. Hillary, would you do the honors for this side plus the Board of Selectmen? And again, I'd remind, looks like you've caught on. Everybody needs to come down if you want to be counted. All right, all those in favor of the proposed amendment, please rise. Excuse me, I'm sorry. To end debate. If you want to end debate, please rise. Twenty-four. 31.
40.
40.
37.
37. And those opposed to ending debate on the proposed amendment, please rise.
Four.
4.
5.
5.
4.
4.
5.
5. The vote being 132 in the affirmative, 18 in the negative. The question has been moved. We will now go straight to a vote on the proposed amendment. This is just a majority vote, so all those in favor of the proposed amendment, please raise your hand. And those opposed? And the chair is in doubt. Again, I would ask for a standing count. All those in favor of the proposed amendment, please rise.
11.
11,
10.
10. 30. 28. And those opposed?
Three.
3. 12.
17.
17.
34.
34. The vote being 79 in the affirmative, 66 in the negative, the motion carries, and the main motion has been amended. We now return to debate on the main motion. Mr. Berman?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Barry Berman, Precinct 6. I want to thank the town manager, the select board, the housing authority for really taking action on that instructional motion that we did back in April to quickly come up with a very well thought out and comprehensive plan on advancing affordable housing here in the town of Reading. The need is even more now than it was in April when we made this instructional motion. I think I read somewhere that the average assessed value of a home in Reading is approaching $1 million, or it's shortly, maybe south of that, but it's getting close. We are not going to be able to attract new families here to town with a diverse economic background, and even worse, we're not going to be able to keep the people in town who helped build this town, because housing is so expensive. So the need is incredibly great. And it's not just here in Reading, it's throughout the Commonwealth. There's study after study that has been done to show that we are tens of thousands of units of housing short of what we need to create and sustain a vibrant economy. So no matter how great of a job Dr. Milichowski does and the great teachers of making the SAT scores great and making Reading a place to live, if we can't attract companies, if we can't attract workers because they can't find a place to live, then all of our housing values are going to go down. So the structure that's been proposed, I think is great, and it puts us in line with what the rest of the Commonwealth does in creation of affordable housing. It creates leadership. It creates a sense of ownership. It creates a group of people that are going to put their heads together and come up with a plan to find projects, raise money, spend money. You saw in every town meeting in the last 10 years, we come up with a spending plan, and we just basically cut and paste the last one that we did because we haven't figured out a way to spend the money that we have, yet alone raise additional funds for affordable housing when the need is only getting greater and greater. We've seen what progress we're making with the senior center when we have residents get together. The Recalc group has come up with some great plans, and I really look forward to what's going to happen there. When we got the money from the federal government for ARPA, a group of residents and volunteers came together to figure out how we're going to spend that in the best interest.
Do we have a point of order?
Well, Mr. Brown, we're talking about the need, right? And this fulfills the need. So moving on to that, so what would a housing trust fund do, right? We spent a lot of time talking about who's going to be on it. Let's talk about what it's going to do, okay? What it's going to do is going to create that leadership to come up with ideas and solutions. It's going to help to raise money. Right now, I believe there's about 350,000 in the Affordable Housing Trust. There are ways to increase the raising of money so that we can look at projects. It's going to find development projects. We had, just in the last couple of months, there was, interesting proposals about maybe what to do with Oakland Road. That sort of came out of it. But you have a group that's dedicated, that's committed, and it's going to look for opportunities, then we're going to be able to move this forward. And it's going to be in alignment with what the rest of the Commonwealth does, right? Reading We jumped the gun in 2001 because we felt the need for affordable housing even then, and we created our own structure. But at the period of, I mean, when we have that structure is the Housing Authority and the Select Board sort of being the Affordable Housing Trust Fund in the town. And I can tell you, on my 4 years on the board, that group went one time, right? And that was only because we had a unit of affordable housing that was going to expire, and we tried to figure out a way to how to save that one unit. And I think in the 4 or 5 years that I've been off the board, that group hasn't met at all. So clearly what we have isn't working. Here is a model that's proven across the Commonwealth that works. We have a lot of people obviously passionate, thinking about like who wants to be on it. I think now is the time to vote for this and create this. And let's try to figure out, put our arms around this, put our heads together, and figure out how to make this town more affordable. Thank you.
Ms. Snow Doxer, did you have a second proposed amendment?
I do have another amendment, and thank you to everyone here for the indulgence, for listening, the deep listening. I appreciate it. So I actually, under the duties, consistent with including a tenant, I would like to suggest, I'd like to make a motion that we add a letter S to the list of duties so that I will read it, I think Laura, Ms. Jem has it, to listen to the financial, legal, or safety concerns of residents and provide support should the concerns meet criteria established by the Affordable Housing Trust Board of Trustees. Concerns can relate to living conditions, financial difficulties, eviction procedures, rent changes, discrimination, or more. And again, I underlined that the concerns, the criteria would be established by the Affordable Housing Trust Board of Trustees. So this wouldn't be arbitrary. There would be criteria established. And the background on that is consistent with the needing representation of the tenants on the Affordable Housing Trust Board of Trustees. There needs to be a way to protect these tenants and communicate with the Board of Trustees about issues that are happening. So that needs to be included in their duties. Thank you.
Is there a second to that proposed amendment? Yes, second, okay. Further discussion on this proposed amendment? Where? Oh, yes, right, Mr. Struble, I'm sorry. Oh,
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Jeff Struble, Precinct 7. I think when you're correcting that, it should be the Affordable Housing Trust Board of Trustees, not Affordable Trust Board of Trustees. That's how it's written. And that's what she said, but I corrected her. But I think you typed it wrong.
further discussion on this proposed amendment? Yes, I think, Ms. Downing, is it?
Thank you, Mary Ann Downing, Precinct 4. Although I supported Ms. Doxer's other amendment, I cannot support this one as written because I just feel like it goes well beyond the scope of the point of this board for providing and maintaining and increasing the supply of affordable housing. I would look first at the first line where it's talking about the financial, legal, or safety concerns of residents. I mean, it doesn't say residents of affordable housing. It should probably say that. But I wonder about the town getting involved and committing to help with private financial, legal, or safety concerns of residents. I can understand, helping residents who are in need of eviction. They may not be getting evicted from affordable housing, but in terms of something like with discrimination, I mean, this board a year ago created a position in the library that is supposed to be handling discrimination, so this feels duplicative to have another board looking into discrimination. And I just don't feel that we should have an unelected board getting involved at this level I feel that this, in the start, Mass General Law, Chapter 44, Section 55C, which says towns may grant additional powers consistent with this section, I just don't feel that this full enumerated list of powers is consistent with this section and is going well beyond the scope of what a board like this should do. And it's taking away from the main duty of this Board of Trustees, which should be maintaining and increasing our supply of affordable housing. And we can help the residents of it, but I just feel that some of the duties listed here are going beyond that. So I'd welcome some clarification about what's intended. What are we, rent changes, eviction, that's specific, but the financial, legal, or safety concerns, that's pretty broad. And that could be private things that have nothing to do with housing. Thank you.
Ms. Snowdoxer?
Thank you, Linda, Precinct 1. First of all, thank you very much for that. The miss that I had, it should be affordable housing residents. So the financial, legal, or safety concerns of affordable housing residents, you're right, I left that. That needs to be more specific. In terms of whether it's relevant or not, I think the quality of our affordable housing stock and how it's implemented is very, very relevant, and relevant to this trust, the Affordable Housing Trust Board of Trustees. So I don't think it's irrelevant at all, and it's giving them a voice. And in terms of it being duplicative to the role of the person in the library, the person in the library is working with all different organizations and boards in town. She is not doing all the work of our town. She's supporting the work in our town. So it's not, I can't say that word, duplicative at all. I think it's collaborative and informative. It would create a collaboration, another source of information. Thank you.
Yes, Ms. Herrick?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Karen Herrick, Precinct 8. I understand the intent of this amendment, and I think it is very important that we treat our affordable housing residents, whether they are owners or they are lessors, with dignity and make sure that we have quality affordable housing. I do have a concern, as I have the Reading Housing Authority definition and roll up in front of me, that as the prior speaker noted, it is creating potentially two bodies with the same objective and who's going to be in charge. I am noting there is a vacant housing authority seat, and I could understand that maybe we think our housing authority isn't effective or doing its job, and that would be another task. And if that is so, then we need to address that. I do agree with the previous speaker. So the trust that we're trying to create today would be to manage our affordable housing assets, funds, create new projects, and manage that. And if we move forward with the CPA in the future, that would be a source of funding. So I see that as a financial and a management role versus a board that is going to actually help deal with day-to-day problems once the housing is created. So I'm not going to be able to support this amendment here. But again, if we have a concern that we are not advocating for the folks that we are building this housing for, then that is another issue that we need to deal with. Thank you.
Further discussion? Yes, Mr. Ventura?
Motion to end debate on the amendment.
I'm sorry, you said?
We're talking about the amendment. Motion
Yes,
to end debate on the amendment.
Yeah. You want
I'd like to end debate. I'd like to vote on the amendment.
Oh, you want to end debate? Is that what you're asking? Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry, I missed your point.
Oh, that's okay.
Okay, there's a motion to end debate on the proposed amendment. Requires a 2/3 vote. Could I ask my same tellers? And all those in favor of ending debate on the proposed amendment, please rise.
23.
23. 27.
32.
32. 31. And those opposed to ending debate?
Three.
3. 6.
13.
13. 15. 15. The vote being 113 in the affirmative, 37 in the negative, the motion carries and debate is ended. We will now proceed to a vote on the proposed amendment. Mr. Ventura, do you have a point? Oh, you're just voting. Okay. All those in favor? We're now voting on the proposed amendment. We just voted to end debate. Okay. All those in favor of the proposed amendment, please raise your hand. And those opposed? Okay, the motion does not carry. We are now back to the main motion under Article 6. Further discussion. Ms. O'Neill?
Thank you. Mary Ellen O'Neill, Precinct 6. Could we just clarify what motion we're voting on? Because we don't have any printed motions, and I thought Mr. Maltese mentioned multiple motions under this article, so we need to clarify what motion we're discussing. Thank you.
I was told you do have printed copies. But Mr. Maltese, did you have anything to add?
We do not have printed copies of the motions. They're on the website and were emailed earlier. But and they're shown on the screen. The motions are essentially what are shown on the screen, but essentially is the 5 components that I shared earlier in the PowerPoint.
Ms. O'Neill?
Thank you. So we need to clarify what those motions are. We don't see the motions on the screen either, so can we go back? And I think there's a sequence of motions that we need to deal with.
Yes. Ms. Freed?
Thank you. To clarify, there is only one motion currently on the table. It just has 5 subparts, and our town manager, excuse me, went through and discussed what each of those parts are. So here you can see part 1 is to accept the special act.
Okay,
So if you
I
look
read
in
it
your
differently,
book,
and he did use motions, so I was unclear. Thank you.
Okay. Further discussion on the main motion? Yes, Mr. Ventura?
Mark Ventura, Precinct 2. We have the Smart Growth District, overlay commission establishment board there. I know this is a little bit different, but there is an overlap there. How does that work with that entity in establishing
Mr. Maltese?
additional stocks and stuff like that?
I'm not sure that there's a smart growth overlay commission. Are you referring to
we started. We
CPDC?
established the Smart Growth Overlay District, which I had concerns about anyways. But I see that Smart Growth District. The spirit of that, like I said, at the last town meeting was Walkersbrook Drive, the DPW area. Out behind the old Rite Aid site, and that grew to above the Congressional Church and all of downtown, and now we have high density housing with inadequate parking. We reduced parking ratios to substandard, allowable compact spaces substandard, and it's becoming an issue downtown a little bit with traffic and everything. But that has nothing to do with it. But
point of order.
How does this
Point of order, Ms. Binder.
Thank you. Point
As
of order.
always.
We're not talking about a smart growth district. We're not talking about Walkersbrook Drive. Walkersbrook Drive is actually not even part of the smart growth district.
Point taken.
Point taken. Please get back onto the subject.
Okay.
And we're not talking about Article 6. We should talk about Article 6, not the smart growth district.
That's what I just
Well,
said.
I just want to know how these two, how this would interact and everything, but I just,
Okay, further discussion on Article 6.
yeah, well, I had another point I was going to make, but.
Okay, what is you have another point?
This committee is selected by the Select Board, is appointed by the Select Board, And then they seem to, in reading the warrant articles and everything, they have some authority that they have to, financial discretion at them, and it has to be approved by the select board. That's within the confines of the budget that we established for this Board of Trustees?
Mr. Maltese?
Is there any town meeting oversight, is my question.
I'll say that this board will oversee the funds that are in the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, but in order to expend those funds, they will require select board approval. If there is a section it's a Q. So in page 17 of your article, it says to make recommendations on proposals to town meeting subject to approval by the select board when such proposals create or support affordable housing for low and moderate income households. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that this board doesn't have access or authority over funds that are normally controlled by town meeting.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Further discussion? Yes, Mr. Berman.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Barry Berman, Precinct 6. I think it would be useful to maybe learn about other communities that have an affordable housing trust and potentially what they actually spend money on. And that ranges anywhere from seed money for projects to subsidized projects, because the market, as you know, is so expensive that any project being built, you have to have high rents and high prices in order to make that project feasible. A housing affordable trust fund with its funds could actually use to be subsidized, whether it's cost of land or other costs, to bring costs down so it could become more affordable. Other people, other communities, use some of the housing affordable trust funds to help potential buyers with down payment and closing cost assistance. The biggest thing right now for a family to do to buy a house is to save for a down payment. Well, if in Reading somebody wants to buy a house and doesn't really have enough for the down payment and the closing costs, the trust fund could be a source of funds for that. And that's just a couple of things, right? It doesn't necessarily going to be projects that are in the smart growth district or not. The world, basically there's so many different things that it could do if it had the money to raise. And right now, we're not spending a nickel, even though the need is great. So there's a lot of things that the money could be spent on, and there are a lot of ways to actually raise money too. And that would be the purview of the commissioners or people on the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. So I just want to throw out those possibilities for help people think about, like, why are we doing this and what it would be used for. I think that there are things that we haven't even thought of that could become possibilities if you have a dedicated group of people whose sole mission is to create and protect affordable housing in Reading. Thank you.
Mr. Baji?
Thank you. Carlo Bacci, Precinct 5. At one of our meetings on the Select Board, we discussed, I guess I would say, checks and balances on the expenditures of the board, and we touched upon, should we put a limit? If they decide to spend $2,000, can they just spend it? If they decide to spend $200,000, so they just spend it. And we never came to a conclusion. So I'd like to make a motion that all expenditures be approved by the Select Board, and those expenditures be reported to town meeting.
Is that a proposed amendment? Is that, okay, you have is that, where?
Yes. Yes.
Where would this go?
I don't know. Good question. Somewhere.
Well, we need to know where when we have amendments.
No,
you. Yeah.
Do you have it the way you want it now?
Yep.
Okay, is there a second to that? Second, okay. Mr. Bacci, you had any further comments on it?
No.
Oh, okay. All right, we are now debating the proposed amendment. Is there further discussion? Yes, Mr. Brown?
Bill Brown, Precinct 8, since town meeting could do nothing about it, I don't see the reason for this article, quite frankly. We can't say no to them. They've got the authority to spend the money. We can't say no to them, so I see no reason for this to be there.
Further discussion on the proposed amendment? Yes, Ms. O'Neill? Okay. That was your question, just you want to make sure you saw both? Okay. Further discussion? Yes, Mr. Berman?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Barry Berman, Precinct 6. I'd just like to remind town meeting that there are a number of trusts here in town. There's a cemetery trust. There's a group of folks who administer trusts throughout the town, whether it's the old hospital trust fund, and none of them are required to go to the select board for approval of the spending of money, regardless of the amount of the expenditure. I'm not opposed to having the trustees, the Affordable Housing Trust, report to town meeting once a year. I think that would be great. I think town meeting would love to hear from that. So, I have no problem with that, but approval of the select board to spend funds, there's no reason for that, and there's no precedent for it in Reading. They're not spending town funds, right? If they were spending town funds, that would be a different story, right? They're raising funds to be used for a specific purpose that don't require select board approval or even town meeting approval. If it's spending town money, perhaps that's a different story, but that's not the case here, so I'd be opposed to the amendment. Although I think any board that's doing great work would love to report to town meeting and to the select board every year anyway. Thank you.
Mr. Doxer?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Mark Doxer, Precinct 1, and current chair of the Select Board. I want to second Mr. Berman's point on this also. I think what we could very easily do is micromanage what's going on here and just be looking at every single thing that goes on. The net result being that we constrain them so that they can't do kind of anything without getting select board approval. To Mr. Berman's point, these are funds that are allocated for this. And to be clear, we already have an affordable housing trust fund that we've proven not able to effectively use. I'm not in favor of putting any more constraints in the way of it so that it could get even worse. Thank you.
Further discussion? Yes, right on the edge.
Anne Marie Corey, Precinct 5. Just a clarification. It's my understanding that the original article is designed to adopt something that's already written into Massachusetts law. Is that correct? That we're essentially replacing something that we already have with something that has been crafted by the state legislature? Am I correct?
Mr. Maltese?
That is generally correct, although we are allowed to make modifications within the spirit of that.
Further discussion on the proposed amendment? Yes, in the back.
Phil Dardino, Precinct 3. Move the question.
Okay, that I assume on the proposed amendment? Okay, is there a second to that? Second, okay. This requires a 2/3 vote. Again, I ask my counters. Point of order.
Thank you. It's in two parts. Are we voting on the expend funds and then the other separately?
It's all one motion, yes.
It's all one motion.
Yes, and we have just have a vote on ending debate on that.
Yeah, so it's one motion,
One
both
motion, one
parts.
proposed amendment, yes.
Okay.
Everyone clear on that? Okay, this vote is to end debate, however. It requires a 2/3 vote. All those in favor of ending debate, please rise.
Twenty-three.
23?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. 33. 33.
40.
40?
41.
41. And those opposed to moving the question?
Six.
6? 6-0?
4.
4?
Two.
2. The vote being 137 in the affirmative and 12 in the negative, the motion is carried, and we have moved the question. We will now go directly to a vote on the proposed amendment, which is in 2 parts, as has been pointed out. All those in favor of the proposed amendment, please raise your hand. Those opposed? And the motion does not carry. Okay, we're now back to the main motion under Article 6. Further discussion? Yes, on the edge?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Charles Donnelly Moran, Precinct 7. I know this isn't going to be popular, but I propose changing Clause N to transfer to the Reading Housing Authority ownership and management of successfully completed affordable rental housing projects.
Okay, let's make sure we have that wording up there before we...
So eliminating to manage or improve real property, changing that to transfer to the Reading Housing Authority, ownership and management of successfully completed affordable rental housing projects.
Except for the couple of typos, is that the way you see it?
Yes.
Okay, and I think we've got the, okay, is there a second to that? Second, okay.
Thank you.
Mr. Donnelly Moran?
Thank you, Mr. Brown. It's my understanding, first I should preface that my wife was recently appointed to the Reading Housing Authority, just in terms of, to the board, just in terms of full disclosure, yes, thank you. I also am employed by a housing authority in a neighboring community, but I'm not financially impacted by this at all. It's my understanding that the Reading Housing Authority has acquired 17 units of housing in the last couple of decades. This is not developments that they had built back in the 60s, but these are units that they've managed to acquire, and that these units, because they can rent them through the Section 8 program at a higher subsidy than they receive from the state for the state units, that these 17 units make a big difference in the Housing Authority's ongoing budget. And that if the Housing Authority didn't have those 17 units subsidizing all the other units, the executive director wouldn't be as qualified as she is, because we wouldn't have enough money to pay her, and we'd have less maintenance staff. So those 17 units, which isn't a whole heck of a lot, because they're being rented out at Section 8 rates instead of the much lower state rates, that the Housing Authority is financially benefiting, and so all of our elderly tenants are benefiting as well. And that the town of Reading is really too small to have two competing affordable housing agencies managing property. So if you want to have a housing trust and they feel like home ownership is the way to go, well, that's not going to impact the housing authority. But if the trust is able to build and acquire housing that is going to be managed on an ongoing basis, well, let's use the agency that knows how to manage housing, who knows how to select tenants, who knows how to get repairs made, instead of hiring an executive director for the trust that's going to be managing a small number of units when we do have the management expertise currently.
Further discussion on the proposed amendment? Yes. Ms. Alvarado?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Vanessa Alvarado, Precinct 5. I would appreciate staff or perhaps town council weighing in on this and providing a little bit more context. I have to admit this is not my area of expertise. I don't know how the rest of town meeting feels, but I don't feel confident voting yes or no on this amendment because I don't understand what the implications are. Thank you.
Ms. Freed?
Thank you. So currently, as drafted in the bylaw, the proposed bylaw, there's nothing that precludes the trust from transferring an asset to the Reading Housing Authority. They could do that if this bylaw passed with the original subpart N. One concern to think about with this proposed subpart N is that all units, once constructed, if they're for rental, would have to be transferred to the housing authority and could potentially preclude the ability to have a public-private partnership where trust funds are used in conjunction with private funds to develop housing, and then those units are transferred to a private affordable housing owner or even a for-profit owner with rental units in their establishment. So one thing to be concerned about with something like this is that you'd be foreclosing that opportunity.
Further discussion on the proposed amendment? Is there a hand? No. None appearing? Are we ready for the vote? Was there a hand? Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. Linda Snowdoxer, Precinct 1. I need some more clarification. So would this amendment enable, I'm wondering if this is sort of an answer to my amendment where if there were issues in an affordable housing development, would this give recourse through the housing authority to deal with those issues? And I'm a little confused. I apologize, but I don't understand. Thank you.
Mr. Maltese?
Thank you. So just to elaborate on what the town council just shared. So say, for instance, right, the Affordable Housing Trust Fund would issue an RFP on town-owned land, and that RFP would be responded by a private entity that would build it, right? This change would require, upon construction, for those units to be handed to the housing authority, and the fear is that this could limit basically the incentive for private developers to join in that venture.
Further discussion on the proposed amendment? Thought I saw a hand over there. No? Any other hands? All right, are we ready for the vote on the proposed amendment? All those in favor, please raise your hand. Those opposed? And the motion does not carry. We are now back to the main motion under Article 6. Further discussion? Oh, yes, right, Mr. Sasso.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. John Sasso, Precinct 2. Just a quick question. So I know with the prior proposed amendment from Mr. Bocci, we voted that down. Obviously, it was two different pieces, so would the moderator entertain a motion or an amendment to this that would just address one of those two parts?
I think
I'll make it even easier. So the recommendation from the previous one was to have a fiscal report. My recommendation was going to be to add a 3377 that said the Board of Trustees of the Reading Affordable Housing Trust shall present a report of activity at each annual town meeting.
before I accept that, Mr. Maltese, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I did. I mean, as you can understand, preparing for a town meeting is a lot of work, right? I mean, and we had recalc as one example, as you were involved, and RAC also, who prepared written reports, right, for a town meeting. I think it's up to the moderator to seek reports annually, right? Be it in the fall or in April. I think that mechanism is already in place, as opposed to adding one more administrative burden to this body that it is going to be made up by volunteers.
So I certainly respect that opinion, and as you say, I've been involved in some of that in the past. I think, well, I guess before I comment further, I'll ask you ask the question.
I think it would constitute reconsideration. You probably should have done that while we had that before us. We should have divided it at the time. So I would not entertain that motion.
Okay. Then I'll just make a comment then, if I may. That I know, again, as others have spoken about how important affordable housing is, and the fact that for many years, and especially culminating with the motion that was made on town meeting in the past to get this back in front of us, I just would hate to see us lose sight of it. So, thank you.
Further discussion on the main motion? Yes.
Phil Dodino, Precinct 3. Move the question.
Okay, there may not have been anybody else, but the question is, there's a motion to end debate. Is there a second? Second, okay. Requires a 2/3 vote. All those in favor of ending debate on the main motion under Article 6, please rise.
$26.
26? 30?
38.
38 or 30? What did you say, Mr. Sasso?
38.
38, okay.
38.
38. And those opposed, please rise.
Five.
5.
1.
1.
4.
4.
0.
0. The vote being 132 in the affirmative, 10 in the negative, the motion carries, and the question has been moved. We will now go directly to a vote on the main motion under Article 6 as amended. All those in favor of the motion, please raise your hand. And those opposed? And the motion carries. Okay. We have a motion to adjourn. Is there a second? Second. All right, this is non-debatable. All those in favor of adjournment until Thursday evening, please raise your hand. And those opposed? And the chair is in doubt. All those in favor of adjourning until Thursday night, please rise.
$25.
I'm sorry, excuse me?
25.
25.
16.
16.
28.
28.
22.
22. And those opposed to adjournment?
Three.
3.
9.
9,
14.
14,
25.
25. The vote being 91 in the affirmative, 51 in the negative. This town meeting stands adjourned until Thursday evening.